access attic. I mean, attic access as well. So the first thing we have to consider are our SOPs. What do we actually have to inspect? According to Nashi, that is the foundation, the basement crawl space, and structural components. So we need to describe the type of foundation, and then report on any wood that you observe in contact with near the soil, any signs of active water penetration, any signs of foundation movement, any notching, boring of structural framing members. However, we are not required to enter into any crawl space that's not readily accessible or that you feel could be dangerous. You aren't required to move any storage items or debris, nor are you required to identify and report on the size, spacing, span, or location of the structural components. Okay. And most importantly, we are not required to report on the adequacy of the structural system or component. Do you know who is qualified to speak to the adequacy of the structural system?
Engineer.
That's correct, a structural engineer. So what we will be doing is we will again be looking for evidence of structural issues, and those defects that we find, those material defects, we will be making the recommendation that the client gets a structural engineer to further evaluate whatever issue that we've identified. Okay. So we're ready to begin, and we begin with our footings, just the same way we did with the deck. I said that the footers are to the house as what are to our body? Feet. Correct. They serve as the base. Okay. So it's the same thing for the deck, same thing for our house. uh, you may or may not know, but our houses are always under force or pressure. So they need to be constructed in a way that can resist that force. Gravity is always pushing down on the house. There's lateral force or side to side force caused by water. We call that hydrostatic pressure that exerts lateral force. So again, we need our, and depending upon where you are, some areas have high seismic activity out there in Cali. Some areas, Florida, have high wind activity. So our homes need to be constructed to basically resist all of these forces and elements. Okay. And a footer is a crucial part of how the house will resist that force. So footers or footings are again the elements that distribute the weight of the building to the soil. So when we were talking about our footers for our deck, we were distributing the weight of the deck. We're going to do the same thing now, but with just the weight of the house, distributing the weight of the building to the soil. Okay. There should be footings under all of your exterior walls as well as your interior load bearing walls. Okay. A load bearing wall just means that it's going to carry the weight of, again, the roof and the upper levels of the foundation down to the house. You need load bearing walls to basically stabilize the building. Okay. So your load bearing walls are going to run perpendicular to floor joists. So if you have a floor joist running this way, you'll have a load bearing wall running perpendicular to that floor joist. Okay. So again, the purpose of your footer to distribute the weight of the building to the soil, also to provide stabilization for the foundation and to support your load bearing walls. Okay. So the book talks about I think a couple different types of footer, but a spread footing is one of the most common. Is basically the builders are going to dig out a trench, and then they put in a form, and then they pour concrete. So you see how this concrete is all straight, it's all uniform. That's because they had wood forms, right? That they poured here, I mean, that they set up here, and then they poured the concrete in, and that's how we got this uniform, excuse me, or same size footer. In newer homes, these posts here, there are rebar. Rebar is basically just like a metal rod that's used to basically reinforce the concrete. So in newer homes, they're going to use that. Now, keep in mind, you will not be able to see any of this unless you are doing a new construction like phase instruction and they call you out at each point. But if you're going to show up to do your standard home inspection, you won't be able to see any of this. You will just have to make the assumption that it is there and it is installed properly. Okay, so your footers excuse me, can be square, rectangle like this one, or even circle. The book gives the minimum thickness of 6 to 19 inches and the minimum width of 12 to 49. Okay. The size and construction of your footer depends on the size of the building. Is it a one-story building? Is it two-story building? And also the load factor. How much weight or load are we going to be carrying? On page 54, there's a diagram of how a spread footing works for a basement and also a crawl space. So this next image here is to show us to kind of put the load bearing walls into perspective. Again, remember, so you have here your floor joists, and then you have the load bearing walls running perpendicular to those, again, to provide stability to carry the weight of this roof. And then also if there was a additional level above. Okay, so that's footings. What questions do you have? All right, well, let me ask a question. T, what are the two types of forces that are acting on our houses?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Earthquake forces and wind forces.
Say that again.
Earthquake forces and wind forces.
That's correct. What are the two that I specifically mentioned?
Gravity and lateral, which you call hydrostatic pressure.
That's correct. I mentioned that gravity is always pushing down on the house, and hydrostatic or pressure from water is creating lateral or side to side force. Okay, you all need to pay attention, lock in on on what we got going on. Okay, this is going to be a lot of information. Let's get into the three main foundation, or the three most common types of residential foundations. As I mentioned, where you live at in the country will play a factor into what types of foundation you might have. Before we get into the actual foundation types, let's talk about the unified soil classification system. The book briefly mentions this. This is not so much of a testing thing, but this is just a FYI for you. So the unified soil classification system is just basically a method or a way to identify and classify soils, or how good the soil is. Okay, because again, if we're going to look at building a house, we need to know what type of soil are we about to build on. So for us as home inspectors, engineers, other construction managers and different stuff like that, understanding the soil conditions at your building site is going to be very important in terms of how you end up constructing your house. So again, this is not something that you will have to identify, but if you hear about this, and again, depending upon the type of foundations you have, you will know, you can literally look up, in your area, what type of soil is most common. The most common are coarse grained and fine grained. Okay, obviously coarse is, a little bit stronger, and then the fine grains are your silts and your clays, the lighter, if you will, soils. Okay, so again, that's just an FYI. It's briefly mentioned in the book. If you hear anybody talking about this or referencing it, or again, if you end up getting into phase inspections, this may be something that you would have to look a little bit more into. Okay. Um, Also, the book talks about piles and piers. Okay, so that these are sort of an alternative foundation method. Both of these are vertical structural elements that basically support your foundation. You hear the terms used interchangeably along with columns. So people, they'll see a vertical support structure and they may call it a pile, a pier, or a column, sort of like slope and pitch when it comes to roof. Typically, piles are going to be, which are right here on your left, are going to be found in coastal areas, North Carolina, South Carolina, where there's weaker soil at the surface. On the coastal areas, you have your silts, your clays, and so that soil at the surface is weaker. So piles are typically driven into the ground. Okay, so they can hammer them in, they can kind of like screw them in, but they're driven deep into the earth again to get past that top layer of weaker soil to end up having strength to be able to support the foundation. Piers pretty much so do the same thing, are going to transfer load to the ground. They're typically wider and shorter than the piles are. As you can see here, these are wood piles and these are CMUs used for the piers. And so uh, again, they serve sort of the same purposes. A lot of times you'll see the piers in crawl spaces, and then also columns. Columns are going to be the same thing. You'll see columns probably most commonly on your porches. Remember, I mentioned in your inspections, a lot of you, when you were doing your front porch, you had columns of some sort. Typically, they're going to be wooden. Okay, so when you see those wooden columns outside on the porch, they should be at least 4x4, and you want them to be treated. Not really, you can't really necessarily confirm that, but that's what it should be. Okay. And then the other place where you see columns is if you live in an area where they have basements. Sometimes there are columns in the basements. If so, in a basement, a column is required to be secured at the bottom. So basically bolted into the floor. Okay. So now we're going to get to our first common residential foundation type, which is a basement. A basement is basically a concrete box that's partially underground or all the way underground. Okay. Basements are usually made of concrete, like you see here in this one, but they can be made of CMU. When you see CMU or concrete masonry unit, that's basically just think cinder block. Okay. So in terms of your basement installation, how do you install a basement? The first thing that you always have to do is your site prep, and that's basically clearing out your area. And then this is where you would they would do soil tests to determine again what kind of soil composition do we have here at this site, and then also grading for the site. Remember, we talked about grading is essential so that we'll have drainage, so water will be draining away from the house. Okay. Second thing we have to do is excavation. Basically, dig the hole for the basement. Basement gonna be about 10 feet deep, so you have to dig deep enough to actually again pour a concrete box, and then you also have to have space on the outside so that people can get in there and actually work. So after you have that, then that's when you're going to pour your footing, your footer around the perimeter of your excavation or your hull. Remember, we need those footings in order to distribute the weight of the house down to the soil. Okay. After we have our footer, then we have our walls, the walls of our basement, right? So again, you can have your poured concrete walls, you can have CMU walls, you can have even back in the day wooden, you could have stone. Most commonly they're going to be concrete or likely CMU. And then again, in a finished basement, you won't be able to see any of this because all you'll see obviously is drywall. Okay, so after you get your walls together, then you have to apply a sealant to the exterior of these walls, right? So the exterior of our basement walls, we want to have a waterproof sealant. Obviously, again, we're doing everything that we can to try to make sure that we keep water out and away from our home and the foundation. In addition to a sealant, we're going to dig out a underground drain around the foundation perimeter. What is the name of an underground drain?
French.
That's correct. A French drain around the perimeter of the foundation. Okay. So after we have that together, you do what's called backfilling. So you basically put the soil back in around the foundation walls. This is where we have, if you remember, in exterior, we were talking about window wells. this is when you would install your window wells if you have those for your basement. And then they pour the floor. So you pour the concrete slab, which basically makes up the floor of the basement. Underneath the floor, there's typically going to be gravel and or what we call a vapor barrier. Vapor barrier is basically just a plastic sheet that's used, again, another way to prevent moisture intrusion. So the concrete floor will be on top of a layer of gravel, typically a vapor barrier, and then you have your concrete floor. Boom, we have our basement basically built. And this is what we would have here in addition to having the floor um poured. Also, one thing I forgot too, you have to install your any plumbing, right? So you're gonna have a floor drain in your basement, so you have to install that before they pour the floor. So this is kind of what it looks like. As you can see, here is the layer of gravel down here at the bottom, and then this is that concrete floor that they would have poured. Remember, I said a floor drain that would drain outside to the sewer. You have your footer here, concrete footer, and then you got your foundation wall or your basement wall built on top of that. This basement wall is made out of what? Who?
It looks like cinder block.
That's correct. CMU, concrete masonry units. On the other side of this wall is the backfield or the soil that we, again, remember we put the soil back. So this is compact against, against the wall. And then here we have all of this is below grade. And then this green right here represents the grass. Okay, so that's above grade. All of this is our below grade concrete box or basement. Basements are going to be most common in up here in the north, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, New York. We're most likely to have basements up here. This is the section, if you recall, I reminded you to make sure that you read and look at the defects at the end of each section because a lot of the test questions come directly from here. So the basement is one of those areas where you will really have to know what you're doing because again a lot of it is going to be subjective. As you see here in the book, it says there's no agreed upon standard for what constitutes reportable foundation defects. Basically, it's all on you, is what that's saying. You're going to again have to inspect, observe, and look for issues, evidence of issues, and then use your common sense and your problem solving to decide what is a material defect, what is reportable, and what is not. We talked about wall rotating, wall bulging. Again, it's protruding in. So vertical or diagonal cracks in your, so like this crack here, this is what we call a stair step crack. Those are again indications. You won't know that the soil under the footer has moved or the footer was not the proper size or anything like that. You won't be able to see that, but if you see those cracks, that could be potentially evidence of that, or that water has again exerted that lateral force. Also, water stains are huge in basements. If you have basements, most every basement you go into are going to have water stains. It's going to either have active, you're going to see water actively coming in, or it will show signs of inactive, meaning prior moisture intrusion. And we always call that out. Okay. So that's basements. The second foundation type, crawl spaces. A crawl space is an unfinished area under the first story of your house. Basically, just raises the house off the ground on average about 1 to 3 feet. Crawl spaces are prone in areas of the country that are prone to flooding, hence raising the house up off the ground above the floodplain. And this is common in areas in the south and southeastern states that have kind of like milder climates. South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, sometimes even California often will have crawl space. Even I think Prescott, I think you guys have crawl spaces in some areas out there in Oregon and Washington too. So again, just think areas with a milder climate. Anywhere where it gets super cold, you're likely not going to have a crawl space. Okay, so that's where you will find it at. In the crawl space houses your utilities, some of your utility systems. So you'll have plumbing lines, electrical, HVAC. A lot of that will be housed in the crawl space. Again, remember that you are not a crawl space is a huge part of the inspection. So if you are able to safely access it, you should. In a lot of cases, you are not, and in that case, you'll have to mark it as a limitation. I think people a lot of times, whenever you hear crawl space, you think of like this creepy, dark, damp like area up under the house, and some of them are like that, but some of them look like this one. Like this one, it would be fine to enter. So you just, again, this is where it will be your rules for your company. But just know that if you have a client who has a crawl space and you're not going to inspect it, you're going to leave them you're going to do them a disservice. So again, just know that. In terms of your installation, same thing. We always got to do our site prep, level out our construction area, see what type of soil we have, what's the grading situation look like. And then we, of course, always have to install our footers. Again, we're going to have your trenches for around the perimeter. And keep in mind that even crawl spaces will have foundation walls, so they'll be enclosed. Okay, so after we pour our footer, then we construct our foundation walls. Okay, also in the crawl space, we have a vapor barrier. So obviously you would have a soil floor in the crawl space. On top of that, you want to have a vapor barrier. As I mentioned, the vapor barrier is this what they call polyethylene sheet, that again, fancy, super strong plastic, essentially. So you lay that down over the soil floor, again, trying to control the moisture, right? Set your drainage and also your venting if you're going to have any of that. And then you install your floor joists, which will serve as the floor for the first level of your house. So basically, the ceiling of the crawl space are the floor joists. If you're in a crawl space and you look up, you'll see the floor joist or the floor of the first level. Soil floor with the plastic vapor barrier laid over top. You look up, you see your wooden floor joist. Okay. Now, access. We talk about access or getting into the crawl space. There are 2 access opening requirements. These are 1000% test questions. You need to commit them to memory as soon as possible. Okay. The access opening requirements. You can access a crawl space inside of the house through on the first level through the floor. So remember how we said if you're in the crawl space, the ceiling is the floor joist. Well, if you go into the house, there could be an opening in the floor where you could open that up and access the crawl space from the floor. If so, then that access opening needs to be at least 18 by 24 inches. You could also access the crawl space from the exterior of the house through a sidewall. If that is the case, then the access opening requirement needs to be at least 16 by 24 inches.
Can you repeat that again?
16 by 24 inches if accessing through a sidewall. And as I mentioned, in the crawl space, you can have your mechanical equipment. So if that is the case, then the access opening needs to be 22 by 30 inches in terms of your access opening space. You need to know all 3 of those.
The 22 by what?
30, 22 by 30 if you have mechanicals.
Mechanic man that the utilities down there.
Yes, sir. I'm going to skip this. We're not going to talk too much about the ventilation because we'll talk about it in our insulation and ventilation section. But just know that your crawl space can be vented or non-vented. And when so, there are specific requirements as for placing. So we'll talk about that in the attic insulation and ventilation section. But I just want to make sure that you are aware of it. So again, this is what the whole thing looks like. So we have our footer that is again below grade. If we want to go below the frost line, how many inches below ground do we need to install our footer?
Isn't that location dependent?
What's the universal standard?
1 inch.
Give it to me in the chat. That's correct. Prescott and Deja and Luke, 12 inches. That's the universal standard. You're right, Naomi. It could be, if you're in a super cold area, the frost line might be shorter, but the universal standard, whenever you're trying to go below frost line, think 12 inches. Okay. We have our footer installed. The vapor barrier here is again laying on the soil floor of the crawl space. The foundation wall, because again, the crawl space is enclosed. And then here, remember the piers that we talked about? As I mentioned, you could see them show up in your crawl space. And then, as I mentioned, the floor joist, and then we go up from there. Here's what it looks like in real life. So this is access through a sidewall. So let me know in the chat, what are the access opening requirements if I am accessing the crawl space through a sidewall? That's correct. Actually, okay, Prescott, I like that. But everyone is wrong. Why is everyone wrong?
It has the utilities down there. So it'd be 22 by 30.
Okay, but that's still wrong. Why is it wrong?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Is it because it's a finished basement?
This is a crawl space. This is a crawl space. The access opening is through a sidewall. What is the access opening requirement?
What was it, 22 by 30?
22 by 30 what? Dollars?
Inches.
Inches. It is an incorrect answer without the correct format. What is 22 by 30? Feet, centimeters, miles? Don't forget that.
Actually, no, meters.
What's millimeters?
Nothing.
Oh. Don't forget to always label your number. 22 by 30 is an incorrect answer. You have to watch things like that on the test. If they put 22 by 30 feet and you just looking at the numbers and select the one that says feet, the answer is going to be wrong. And then you get to the end and you get your thing back and they say you scored a 499 and the passing score is 500. And that one question made you fail the test. And now you got to come back and take it again. Another 225 US American dollars. Okay, so always include your label, but that is correct. And Prescott, that is a good call out. So this is HVAC, right? So there are mechanicals in the crawl space. So the access opening requirement needs to be 22 by 30 inches. Okay, this is what we have here. Here is the vapor barrier. As you can see, it is again laid over the soil floor. It has to be sealed up. Okay, so you know, if you have, just say you had a sheet that was 10 by 10 and you may need 4 sheets at every joint, that has to be totally sealed, otherwise it does no good. And if you can see here, it actually it goes, I think it goes up the wall 6 inches. Again, we'll get into this when we get into insulation and ventilation, but I just want you to understand how we put together these crawl spaces. Okay, so access opening, vapor barrier, we look up, we've got our floor joist. Now, here's one that you may be tempted to call a limitation. Now, if you open up the access door and you see this, so I don't deal with a lot of crawl spaces because, again, I live in the north and we have basements here. I've gone in a few crawl spaces in Georgia when I was training. This would be, if I lived in a market where crawl spaces were common, this would be my thing. If it was dry and I could see, I would go. Dry invisibility. If it is damp and dark, it's a no for me. Because you gotta remember all type of pests, animals, bacteria, especially if you have standing water in the crawl space, you have bacteria in there that could kill you. Like, those are just the facts. And again, this is one of those areas where a lot of the boomer home inspectors will swear by, you got to go in there, put on a wetsuit and a hazmat, and no matter what, get in there. And I just don't believe that. I just don't believe in risking my safety and my health, for that. I just don't. Maybe, somebody else would, but for me in my house, it would be a no. Okay, so again, I need to be able to see so that I can visually verify I'm not about to crawl up in here and there's a skunk in there or a raccoon or anything like that, and I'm not getting in contact with any sort of standing water.
Do you think the report will be satisfactorily okay for visual inspection of maybe if it's a discouraged situation and you just say it's dark, muddy, all kind of stuff in there? Do you think the report will be satisfactorily okay to the customer?
Well, if you're not able, anytime you're not able to visually view anything, you're limiting your inspection and thus your report. There are some cases where you need to limit it though, because it's not safe. It would not be in certain cases. It's not just me that it's not safe for. It's not safe for you either. So in those cases where I deemed it unsafe, I would explain why in my report. And at the end of my inspection, I typically walk my client around and show them any of the major things that I found. And that would be one thing, so that they won't get the report and just be surprised and be like, why should they do the crawl space? I'll walk them over there, open up the crawl space door, shine the flashlight in there, and show them why the hell I'm not getting in there. If they got a problem with that, I've already been paid at that point. So
I mean, this is also a real life scenario for me. One of my townhouses actually had issue like this. The builder it was still within the first year, and some houses in Delaware, they also have issues with some crawl space and basement, except if you're close to like a pond area. So, but I did got the builder warranty to get it done. It was actually outside before they could actually find a fix for that. So, but some contractors that deals with crawl space were trying to make it nicer. So, plus a sub pump, make it dry, this and white stuff, and that's going to cost like a couple of $1,000s. But I'm just looking at if this become a reality of seeing houses with crawl space like this, because if I didn't address my property initially, it would turn to something like this in the future.
So are you saying that you actively have water in your crawl space?
Not anymore. No, not anymore.
But you did?
I did. Yes, I did. And the builder was able to mitigate it then.
Okay, there was a new build?
To do a drain. It was a new build. Yes, it was a new build. And I don't think my inspection covered that. I could remember my inspection report 3 years ago. It didn't cover crawl space.
Did it mark that it was marked as a limitation?
Some sort. I think so. Yeah. It was. Yes.
So I would have questions about that because number one, on a new build, why do you have water going into the crawl space? That's number one. Number two, if it was a new build, why was the inspector not able to access the crawl space? Number three, what happened at the phase inspections at each point where they were, footer, foundation, all of that kind of stuff? What were the findings? Those would have been, because you shouldn't have, as at a new build, you shouldn't have water like that going into your crawl space. And you're absolutely right. If not, see, most people don't even know. They wouldn't even know that they had water. And a lot of people think that if it's not like, water rushing in there, that is no big deal. But, it's small droplets, you know what I mean? Over time could end up, will end up causing you major issues. So again, I say all of that to say, even, to your point, maybe I don't know what that inspector saw on that day. I'm just thinking if it's a new build and you're inspecting it before the client moves in, I'm thinking you should be able to access it, or to at least show and give an indication like, hey, there's water in there. Because remember, I said I'm going to open up the door. I may not just go all the way in there, but I'm going to open up the access door to at least visually look in. As soon as you open up the door, you could smell the moisture. You know what I mean? So I would have questions. You also bring up another good point. If I were you all, I would do some research on home warranties, these builder warranties. I don't particularly care for them because in my experience, the warranty provider always finds some way to wiggle out of actually providing any sort of warranty services. So if I do your own research and look into it, but what I recommend to people is to have a good inspection so that what is going on, what the condition is of everything, and then you need to keep some reserves so that nothing catches you off guard. A lot of people, what they try to do is they don't, they may not see the value in an inspection and they want to have a contractor come out. Well, there's a couple of things wrong with that, right? As a contractor, I'm gonna get to you in a minute, Ty. If I'm a plumber, right, and I come out, I'm not getting paid unless you got plumbing issues. So what's the chances that when I come out, something gonna be wrong with your plumbing, Ty? So this is why you need an unbiased. Same thing with the roof. If you think you got a roof leak and you have a problem with your roof, you call a roofing company. They don't make no money coming out to just look and tell. They're gonna make their money when they say, yes, we got to tear this roof off, the underlayment and everything, and put a whole new one on there. Whereas an unbiased third party inspector, when I come out to do my thing, I got paid a flat fee. I don't care if you buy the house. I don't care if they take the price down or up. I'm just here to give you an assessment of everything, the condition of all of the major systems in the home. And if you have that, chances are you won't need that warranty, because you'll know, hey, my water heater is close to the end of its service life. Hey, you're this, you're that. So you'll already know. You can go back and negotiate what you need to negotiate in your transaction. And then after you buy the house moving forward, you'll still, have an idea of where your major systems and components are. Ty, your question.
I ain't got no question. I was just saying, since I am a plumber, 90% of new builds, you're gonna have water in the crawl space simply because it rained and then they cover it with wood and that moisture just get trapped in. But me being a plumber, 90% of stuff under that house is more scared of you than you are of it. So if you're moving, it's gonna get out your way. But if you sitting still under there, a snake or something will come up and snuggle up and get you because you're warm. So move. Get in and get out if you're going.
I still so tired. What about this? Okay, but a new build, by the time that the buyer has gone under contract and all of that, you shouldn't have standing water under the, even if the rain had, they should, if you had that much rain to where you would have standing water, they should have sucked it out. Pause.
Well, no, it all depends on the way they do it. Like the house that you showed with all the plastic and everything, if they put the concrete foundation and put that plastic and then start building above it, you'll have some water trapped under the plastic.
No, the
But-
plastic, then the concrete floor is on top of it.
Yeah, what I'm saying is when they're building it, you know how people are. They're not gonna leave the plastic off. They just go throw it under them and it'll trap it in. So at times at times we'll go in there, we'll plumb a house and the foundation been there, 3 weeks already. And you go in there to plumb it and it's mud, a foot deep under the house.
And with a crawl space?
Yeah.
So there's no vapor barrier on the over top of the soil?
Yeah, but you're sinking. You're stepping on plastic and you're sinking down in that mud. And of course, most of the time it just be strips of plastic laying there. A lot of times they don't lock the plastic down.
Oh, they ain't doing no good. They may as well take it up. It ain't doing no good if it's not sealed up.
Yeah. A lot of times it's not. They just lay it across the top because that's where they can save some money. Your building and stuff like that.
Listen, when you get a new build home, you got to watch these people. I'm telling you, this is my like how I view it. A new build is like, I'm not gonna say it. That's too much. Maybe I said in week 6 or 7, but when you get these new builds, you gotta watch, man. You got to watch and you gotta pray. And you need to have, what happens is these builders don't want the buyers to have their own inspector. The builder want to have their own inspector inspect the property. And that's crazy. That literally makes no sense. And so a lot of people think, oh, they building it from the ground up, it gotta be right and stuff like that. And no, that's absolutely not the case. And again, most people, look at all this stuff that we learning. How many people just think in your circle? There may not be one other person that have any knowledge like this. So they don't have any way to advocate for themselves. Most people just be excited about getting a new house. So you definitely got to watch and never let anybody try to tell you you don't need an inspection for a new build, because I might argue that you need one of those, an inspection on a new house more than even an old house. At least an older house, you know what you're getting. You know it's an old house. You likely know these new houses, they got them all painted up pretty and stuff like that, and you have serious issues, going on. But anyways, that's beside the point. All right, so we good on crawl spaces? All right, let's move to our last one, which is slab on grade. So a slab on grade foundation is basically just a concrete slab that's directly on the ground. So it's going to serve as the foundation and also the floor of the house. T. Oh, no question. Okay. Typically you're going to have a single layer of concrete. It needs to be a minimum of 3.5 inches thick. That is a test question. Your concrete slab for your slab on grade foundation needs to be at least 3.5 inches thick. Again, within your slab for your newer homes, you're going to have wire or some sort of rebar for stabilization and, reinforcement. Again, you won't be able to see that because it'll be within the concrete. Remember the some of the sort of non-structural defects that we talked about that show up in concrete. So your crazing, that's your smaller cracks. Spalling, that's when the actual finished surface is going to separate. Dusting is a powder surface. A powder substance on the top of the surface, and then a pop out. A pop out is where you have those. It's like a cone shaped part of the concrete that literally pops out. So if you see these are all non-structural. As I mentioned again before, anytime people see a crack or anything in concrete, they get they get defect happy. They automatically assume it's an issue, and quite often it's not. So make sure that you are aware of and can visually identify non-structural defects that may show up in your concrete anywhere you see it. Okay. In the book, they talk about two types of slab: the floating or matte slab. This sits directly on grade, and they use the term it has uniform thickness, meaning it is the same thickness throughout the slab. The picture that we're looking at is one of those, and you can see again. Oh, that's not rebar. Those red lines, those are plumbing lines. So all of that stuff has to be laid before they pour the concrete. So that's your floating. And then your monolithic is a slab that has your footings at the perimeter. So for a monolithic slab, the whole slab area is 3.5 inches until you get to the edges, where those are a little bit thicker and larger because that serves as your footing. It's like a built-in footer. Okay, so monolithic versus floating. Okay. Now, for the installation process, as always, your site prep. You still got to do some excavation, leveling out, and getting your grading correct for your drainage. As I mentioned, you got to install your utilities, your plumbing, electrical, again, before you pour the concrete. And remember, they have to be placed in the correct position because they're going to be laid in or encased in concrete. Same thing, you have your moisture barrier. So you may have your gravel and then a moisture barrier on top of that. And then that's when you would have your slab, again, with your reinforcement, your rebar, whatever the case may be. And then again, you pour your concrete a minimum of 3.5 inches thick. They smooth it out and then they allow it to cure. And that's the process where a lot of the non-structural defects can come into play. Okay, so that's slab on grade. Pretty simple and straight to the point. Literally a piece of slab, a concrete slab on grade. The stem wall is basically just a short wall that connects the foundation to the house. So you ever see a house and it has vinyl siding, and then you look down at the bottom, and around the bottom of the house it looks like brick? In a lot of those cases, especially like here where we have basements, that is the stem wall. So the concrete box, the basement is underground, and then the stem wall is on top of that, connecting the basement to the actual house. So that is what this is. Often either mortar or some sort of CMU. And again, these are just rebar for additional stabilization. Ladies and gentlemen, those are your common residential foundation types. What questions do you have? No más preguntas?
I got a question real quick. You say like in the crawl space, if it's dark, basically when would it not be dark in the crawl space? That's what I'm trying to.
You mean as far as like, do they have lights in there?
Yeah, like would they ever have lights, or would ever be like,
yeah,
like a little window or something, egress window?
Yeah, there could be lights in there, not a window. There could be vents that would let in light. Normally, if it's dark in there, then that is not gonna, I don't want to say finished because it's not necessarily finished, but going back to our photo, some of your crawl spaces are going to look like this, and they could have lights in there. But then some of them are going to look like this. And the only light that you would get would be when you open up the access door, again, from a vent, some small little light like that. Okay. Naomi, hold on 1 second, Ty. Let me get Naomi.
So for slab on grade, if I understand correctly, we wouldn't actually be able to see it because the house is built directly on top, unless maybe there was some type of garage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You just know that if the foundation is slab on grade, when you stand on the inside of the house, you're standing on the slab, foundation and floor. Ty, what's your question?
I was just speaking on the crawl space. In South Carolina, you have to have at least one light that's usually located at the HVAC unit under there. But you know, some houses, if it's a cheap builder, that's your only light under there.
Exactly.
Other houses, you know, the builder may be nice to give you rows of lights some places. Other places you don't have that one light. And he being cheap, so it's gonna be like the worst light bulb ever.
And you got to remember too, every crawl space not going to be on a new build house. Some of these houses would have been there for, 40, 50, 60 years. And maybe it was a light there initially, but people not going in the crawl space, to maintain lights and things like that. So you never know. Like if you get a newer home, then yeah, you may have, but even in them cases, sometimes people don't always. That's a point. Like something like that is a local code requirement, right? So if they didn't already pass the code inspection, they ain't gonna put no light. You know what I mean? So that's the other thing that we will have to be mindful of, and that again distinguishes us from that. We're not there to call that. If that was, we wouldn't call that out necessarily as a deficiency because we're not there inspecting for code, even though Ty knows that in his area that is a requirement.
I mean, I had a house a few weeks back that laying on my stomach outside, I couldn't get through the access. And like I'm literally like looking in, but I couldn't get into access. So I had to call other guys like, "Yeah, you think you can fit through here?" And I mean, it probably was a 1940s house, but that access had to be like, man, maybe 16 by 12 or something like.
Yep. See, that's the other thing too, because those access requirements, those are code requirements. According to the building code, that's where we got those figures from. Well, obviously, 50, 60 years ago, the building code was not the same as it was now. So back then, they probably didn't have hey, the crawl space access opening has to be this size. People was just putting, a little bitty opening. And then we realized, hey, we can't get in there to service the utilities, or we can't get in there to do this. So now if you're going to have a crawl space, you have to have an access opening that is at least this size. So this is where we get codes from things being done like that.
And the worst houses ever are the ones that have the crawl space access from inside the house.
Really? Why you say?
Yeah, because you pull up that, like, most of the time it'll be like in the closet. So you're open the closet door and pull up like a little hatch in the floor, and you're literally dropping down
Right
2.5, 3 feet, and then you gotta bend down and shine your flashlight across. And something could be behind you, something could be under you, something could be anywhere. So that's the one that I got limitations about.
Ty said he already knows this, but he ain't even seen it. He knows it's a limitation. Hey, if you haven't seen, go look up. It's a movie called Crawl Space, and it's an older movie, but it's actually really good. It's about a dude like getting trapped in his crawl space, and he got like people robbing his house. Is actually really good, and will show you. It will give you kind of like the vibe of what we're talking about being in a crawl space. Rob.
Yeah, so that's thin wall. Is it built like after the backfill happens, or is it just built, all the way up with the, the foundation or the base wall?
After the backfill.
After the backfill. Okay.
All right. Let's try to get through flooring and walls. All right. Now we got the foundations out the way. We're going to move to the structure of the house, starting with the floor. Okay. We've already been talking about it, referencing it, but it's important to point out, especially when talking about the floor joists, and that's dimensional lumber. Okay, so dimensional lumber is wood that is cut to basically predefined sizes. So all wood is not dimensional lumber. Okay, it's dimensional lumber if it's cut to a basically a standard size. So your 2x4, your 2x6, 2x12, all of that is dimensional lumber. The other thing that you want to know is that they are named by what they call their rough cut size, not the actual size. So a 2x4 is not technically 2x4. It is really 1.5 by 3.5. Okay, so they call it actual size versus nominal size. Okay, and obviously, again, dimensional lumber is wood that is cut to predefined standard sizes. All right. So our floor joists are the structural member that make up the floor. And then what bears on top of our floor joists?
Sheathing.
That's correct. Just like where else in the house? That's correct. Okay, so like we have our rafters, and then we have the sheathing on top of the rafters. With the floor, we have our floor joists, and then we have our sheathing on top of the floor joists. Okay, so each species and grade of dimensional lumber is allowed to span or run a certain distance based upon the how you're going to use the room, the size of the lumber, and how much load. So when you talk about span, that's just meaning length, right? So the joist can span the full length of the room. Okay, so joist span. All right. One thing you definitely need to know is that the maximum uniform live load is 30 PSF or pound square foot for bedrooms and 40 PSF for other rooms. So again, our floor joists are designed to withstand or to hold a certain amount of load. Okay. And it is the maximum uniform live load. What does live load refer to? Let me ask. Hold up. Let me ask Luke. What does live load refer to?
I'm not sure.
What do you think?
Live load, however much weight is on the floor, I guess.
So if I got do you remember there are two types of load? Do you remember what they are? I just told you one of them.
Yeah.
Did you say that, Luke, or was that somebody else phoning a friend?
Route somebody else.
All right, let me ask somebody else. T. I got two types of load. Come on, Davidson. Represent. I got two types of load. Dead and live. What does that mean?
Live sound like it's actively on there right now, and dead is like empty room, I guess.
Hey, I like the way you thought through that. I like that. I like that. But no. Cola. Dead and live load. What is that? What that mean?
Dead load are kind of just building material that permanently attach features, something like an HVAC. And live load load imposed by the occupants and the building.
That's correct. Luke, did you write that down? Because next time I ask you, I need you to know. Dead load, building materials, things that are not alive. Live load, you and I, the people. The people. Okay? So, our maximum uniform live load. So that means how many people or how much weight from people is 30 PSF for bedrooms and 40 PSF for other rooms. Okay? Floor joists are installed either 16 or 24 inches on center, most commonly 16. So again, that just means from the center of the joist, you go 16 inches, another joist. 16 inches from the center, another joist. Floor joists should bear at least 1.5 inches on wood and at least 3 inches on concrete. Does anybody know what that means? What does that mean if I say floor joists should bear on?
Rest on.
That's correct. So again, my joist span, these joists are resting or bearing on something, right? So if it's wood, then that means I need to have at least 1.5 inches of the joist resting or bearing on that wood. So say if it was another wooden beam, remember how beams are big brother and a joist could bear on a wooden beam? If so, I need 1.5 inches. If it's concrete that is resting or bearing on, there needs to be at least 3 inches of the joist. That is a test question. Now, the sheathing that we talked about that's installed over top of the joist should be installed perpendicular to the floor joist and should span at least 3 joists. So again, if we have our joist going this way, then our sheathing will be going this way. And it should cover at least 1, 2, 3. Each sheet of sheathing should cover at least 3 joists. Prescott.
One thing that at least I never caught reading an HIA book, and now reading the IRC book, was that it points out and makes very clear that it has to be the entire width of the joist that covers an inch and a half, the 1.5 or 3 inches. And they use some examples of where it's like a diagonal cut or something, only half of it, but that's something it's not up to code. It's a defect.
Look at you, my little building code inspector. All right, so that's our sheathing. And for your sheathing, each piece should be 24 inches wide. So for your sheathing for the floor, you are going to have a sheet of OSB, which is basically fake wood or wood particles, okay? And you're going to have a sheet of it. Looks rectangular. The sheet or the piece should be at least 24 inches wide. It should be installed perpendicular to the floor joist, and it should cover 3 of the joists. That is the sheathing for your floor. Okay. Blocking is something that we use to keep the floor joist from twisting or moving. Okay. The same thing, we use bridging for the same things. Okay. Bridging sometimes is installed like around the center of a joist, again, to prevent any movement. And bridging a lot of times will look like an X that's installed. I think in the book it shows a picture of it, but here it is as well too. Again, it's just for additional support. Okay. One thing that we can cover here, and also it applies to balconies. Sometimes we have our floor joists that will extend past or go beyond a supporting wall. When we have the extension of a floor beyond a supporting wall, does anybody know what that's called? Oh, I can't believe it.
Cantilever.
That's correct. It's called a cantilever. That is on page 61 in your book. So if you think about an apartment building and you know how each of the apartments has a little balcony, that is the floor extending beyond a supporting wall. That is a cantilever. Okay. The other thing about our floor joists is sometimes we may have openings. Why would you have an opening in your floor joist?
Crawl space, maximum.
Crawl space.
What else?
Ventilation.
In the floor joist? An opening in the floor joist. Why? Why would we have?
Notching or boring?
Say again?
Notching or boring?
Nope. I'm getting to notching and boring, but no. An opening. So we got, these are floor joists in our room right here. If I just cut out this section right here and had an opening in my joist, why would I do that? What if you had a 2-level house, a 2-story house? How do you get from one level?
Stairs. Oh,
That's
shit.
correct. In order to install stairs, you've got to basically cut or open up the floor joist, right? 1 level, 2 level. Okay. So an opening for this, for in the floor for your stairs requires what we call trimmer joists and header joists. Basically, again, just an additional way to provide support, because remember, our floor joist is holding the load, has a certain amount of load that it can hold. But if we cut it or interrupt it and have an opening, then we alter that load. The trimmer joists and header joists help to support. Now, to Rod's point, we do have within our joists and also beams, we have something that's called notching. So notching is basically just cutting out a piece of the wood, basically. Notching. Notching is cutting out a piece of the wood, and then boring is driving a hole through the wood. So imagine, again, you had one, here's a joist, a floor joist. And if you cut out a piece of it, that is a notch. We have very specific notching and boring requirements. Again, obviously, because we could affect the structural integrity of our floor joists if you get to cutting and putting holes just all willy-nilly. Okay. So make sure you write this down, because it is definitely on the test and it shows up in a number of different ways. Okay. For notching, notches on the top and the bottom of the joist may not exceed 1/6 of the depth. You see? Notches at the top and the bottom may not exceed 1/6 of the depth of the joist, except for at the ends of the joist, where the notch can exceed 1/4 of the actual depth. All of this is in your book, so you don't need to worry about trying to write down everything I'm saying. Listen, pay attention, and understand. You can jot it down from your book later, okay? Notches at the top and the bottom, okay? Notches may not be longer than 1/3 of the depth of the joist. So that is this measurement right here, notch length, okay? So you don't want a super long cutout in your joist. And then notches may not be located in the middle third of the joist. So you can't have any cuts in the middle of the joist. You got to cut on the ends, which makes sense, right? You wouldn't want to take a chunk out of the middle of the joist that you're literally going to be stepping on, okay? So that's notching. Boring. Again, the bore is the hole. You cannot have the diameter of your hole cannot exceed 1/3 of the depth of the joist. That is this measurement here. And you cannot insert any holes within 2 inches from the edge of the joist or within 2 inches of another bored hole or notch. So no holes on the edge or within 2 inches of another one. Just think about this. Again, you don't want to have at the end of your joist to have a hole. You don't want to have a bunch of bored out holes right next to each other. Again, that would totally erode the structural integrity of your joist. Okay. So even if you can't remember for your test, if you're trying to recall the specifics, just know it doesn't make sense to have a bored hole at the edge of my joist. It doesn't make sense to have notches or cutouts in the middle of my joist. Okay, That's just common sense, even if you can't recall the actual numbers. Okay. Let me pick up the pace. We running late. All right. Wood I-joist. Okay. So again, dimensional lumber is typically how we use what we use for our floor joists, but you can have wood I-joist as an alternative. These are again engineered wood products. This is exactly right here what OSB looks like. Engineered wood. Okay. So remember we talked about this. You can have I-joist for your floor also for your roof and frame it. These are much more expensive, but they're also much lighter. So you may find these in newer homes. You won't find these in older homes. And basically what this is this piece of vertical OSB board slides into a top piece and a bottom piece that are like wooden strips, and there's a little groove right there. So you can kind of just slide it right in. So this vertical piece right here is called the web. And then the top and the bottom wooden pieces are called the flanges. Okay. Again, you can read more about this in your book. I don't have time to go in depth. Also, floor trusses. Again, just like roof trusses, these are engineered structural components built off site and then brought to the site in order to install. Another alternative to having your dimensional lumber joist, what you need to know here is the top cord or the top member, or I said that wrong. The upper horizontal member is the top cord. The lower horizontal member is your bottom cord. And then the diagonal pieces on the inside here are your web. Top cord, bottom cord, web. Okay. All right. This is our last section, and this is the most important one. So stay with me here, and then we're going to be done. All right. Wall system. Okay. So our walls have to support our load and also resist horizontal or lateral load. The most common framing material in the United States is what?
Wood.
Thank you. Wood is the most common framing material. While we can have CMUs, and back in the day, remember we talked about we had structural brick walls. So back in the day, there was no wood framing material. They just got a bunch of stones and stacked them all together, and that was your wall. Okay. Now, again, we're going to be using wooden framing in order to erect the structure for our home. We got two types of framing: platform and balloon. Platform framing and balloon framing. Okay. Platform is on here on your left. Each floor is framed separately. So you start here, go up to your second level. Each floor is framed separately. Whereas in balloon, you have long continuous wooden studs that go from the foundation all the way up to the top of the house. Luke, which one is better? Platform or balloon, and why?
I would say platform. I feel like that have more stability.
Why?
I mean, I feel like, I don't know, the leverage is there. I mean, the balloon framing is just long studs. I feel like that's not very supportive.
So if I got balloon framing in my house, I got an issue. I need a new house.
Nah, I ain't saying all that.
Naomi, what you think? Which one is best? Which one is ideal? Which one would you rather have?
Oh, I know platform is.
Why?
I don't even. That's what I was going to ask you. Like, do they even have houses with balloon framing anymore?
I mean, there are still some left, but they're not creating any new ones with it. Why not?
Yeah, I didn't even know we still see them.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of structural integrity.
What about the structural integrity?
I'm sorry. So one of the issues was, if I remember correctly, was fires. That was one of the issues with balloon framing.
That is the major issue with balloon framing. If you have a house where you have long continuous studs like this that go from the foundation all the way to the top of the house, if you have a fire here, that fire will eat that wood, those wooden studs up so quick and spread throughout that house so quick. Whereas in platform, each one is framed separately. So with fire stopping, you would likely contain or stop that fire from spreading. You know, a fire, you know, would hate to see a fire coming. So again, with balloon, you would have it poses a higher safety risk. And again, now they're not constructing houses with balloon, but we still have some. Again, you got to remember, in some places there are homes that are 100 years old, so we still could potentially have that. Who had a question? Or you don't have it anymore? I missed it. Okay. Oh,
That was me. I had my hand up,
you have a question?
and then you called on me. No.
Oh, who else was that?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Do it say any defects with platforms, with the platform build?
Does it say any defects?
Yeah,
You mean in the book?
yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Because if you do certain stuff with platforms, with the platform build, it's horrible. Like that's how you have places where like floors collapsing and stuff.
Yeah, but it's not worse than balloon though.
Yeah, it in the book it does say there is some defects and stuff with platform, but mostly it calls out the balloon stuff, mainly because of the fire blocking and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have none of this stuff is without issue. But if you got a house, you'd much rather have platform and deal with them issues than balloon at this point in the game. Right.
What type of material is fire blocking? Is it being represented by the black part in platform framing?
I don't. Maybe that's what they're trying to depict. But fire blocking can be a couple of different materials. We're gonna get to that here in a second. Fire blocking and also draft stopping. All right, so we good on framing? All right, so now we need to learn the structure of the house starting from the bottom. So we have our foundation, we got our floor system. Now we need to know the structure of the house, and we're going to start from the bottom and work our way up. So let's say we have a house and the house has a basement. Okay, so we know we got a concrete box that's underground. On top of that concrete box, we would have what's called our seal plate or our sole plate. The seal plate is a piece of horizontal lumber that is attached to the foundation wall. It basically starts out the framing of our house, kind of. Okay, so again, remember, we got a concrete box. Now we're about to frame up our wooden house. The seal plate starts that off. Okay, so the seal plate is attached to the foundation with bolts that are at least a ½ inch in diameter. Where else have we seen bolts that are at least a ½ inch in diameter? That is correct. The deck ledger. That's correct. Okay, so whenever you think bolts, think they got to be at least a ½ inch in diameter. Okay, they are at a minimum of 1 inch in diameter, and they are spaced every 6 feet. Okay, every 6 feet. There are also specific requirements for the seal plate and how all of these bolts are placed as well. Again, this diagram is in your book, so you'll need to go over it. But just so you know, the bolt should not be located more than a foot from the edge of the plate, or 12 inches, see here. And then again, bolts should not be installed in the middle third of the plate as well. So again, look in your book and you can read. This diagram is literally out of your book. I want to make sure we keep going, but that's the seal plate or the sole plate, S-O-L-E. Excuse me. All right, so next, now we're to our interior wall. So when you look at in your room, this is what we've got going on behind the drywall. At the bottom, we have what's called a bottom plate. Very similar to the seal plate or to the sole plate, but this bottom plate is basically going to serve as kind of like the frame for our wall. Okay, so we got our bottom plate, which is horizontal, and it serves as the base for the wooden studs, which are the wooden vertical framing members here. These wooden studs are placed 16 inches on center, just as our floor joists. Okay, so wooden studs every 16 inches. Typically going to be made with dimensional number 2x4s or 2x6s, depending. Above every opening in the wall. Okay, so remember we talked about the openings in the floor joists for the stairs. We got to have openings in the walls for our windows and for our doors. Above every opening in the wall, there should be a header. Here's the header for the door. Here's the header for the window. A header is the horizontal wooden structure, again, that's to support an opening in the wall. Along with the header, you have the king and the jack studs. The king and jack studs are nailed together. The king stud is a full height, see here, and then the jack stud is on the inside, and it is a little bit shorter. Jack studs or trimmer. Okay, so here and same thing here. And then to cap it all off, you have a top plate. You should have a double top plate. So basically just 2. Okay, and it should be a minimum of 2 inches thick. Okay, obviously to connect all of these wooden structural members, we're using nails or fasteners. Okay, it's important. You got to use the right size and right type of nails. All nails are not the same. So the same concerns that we have with notching and boring in our floor joists, we have in our wall studs as well, because obviously, again, now we're talking about the structural integrity of the wall. This is also in your book. This is also a test question. So improperly notched studs. Okay, so notches in load bearing walls may not exceed 25% of the actual stud depth. So this is, again, a diagram that is in your book, so you can go and take notes on this, but this is what it looks like when it's in your vertical framing members. Okay, so again, this is the meat and potatoes. This is what you need to know. You will not be able to see this in your inspection, but you definitely need to know this. Bottom plate, vertical studs, header at any opening, jack and king studs for support. I need a double top plate. See, this is a good example of how InterNACHI and NHIE differ, because NACHI says a minimum of 4 inches, NHIE says a minimum of 2 inches for the top plate. So make sure that you answer 2. All right. That does it for foundation and structural. Are there questions?
For walls that are not load bearing, can you just go ham and cut notches and boulders wherever you want, or is there still like a diagram for those?
Say that one more time.
For walls that are not load bearing,
Mm-hmm.
can you just put holes wherever you want?
Notches in non-load bearing walls, you can't have more than 40%. So there's still a requirement. It's just you can notch it less in a load bearing, because obviously that's more important for your stability. Naomi.
Don't we have to take a NACHI test as well
What do you mean?
for their certification? Don't we have to take their exam?
Mm-hmm. I mean, for my test, for everything that you do for me will be NHIE and the NHIE. So that's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we be remembering these differences for the NACHI certification?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. You know how I feel about that. I don't care how you get past it. You know.
Okay. All right.
But yeah. Prescott.
Yeah, did that get discussed at all?
What?
Between the InterNACHI and NHIE that was brought up in the group chat for my group.
Y'all, what did y'all bring up? Was there a question or what?
what are you guys in the passion out with that? I don't know if that ended up getting addressed or not.
What?
Prioritizing one over the other.
Oh, yeah. I think we talked about that. Again, remember, guys, it's going to depend on really your state, where your priority lies. But we did talk about them and the differences and how all of that shakes out. And it's not like, these are they're huge differences, because again, all of this stuff is based off of code anyway. So it's just small, minor, little, again, 2 inches, 4 inches, where if you're going to, like Naomi doesn't necessarily have to take the NHIE. So if she's only going to get NACHI certified, then she would need to answer 4 for that test. But for T, who has to get NHIE, he need to answer 2 on his test. Clear? Was that a lot of information? Did it make sense? Did you learn anything? Are you confused? Are you overloaded?
Yeah, it's like a lot of small systems, but they all kind of make the same. It's all like the same thing.
It is. It is like the same thing.
I feel smarter for the show.
You feel what?
Smarter.
That's what's
I
up.
learned something.
That's what's up. That's the goal.
I was wondering why those old houses like went up in flames like this with the balloon frame. It makes sense because it's prior to like
Just like that. Just like that.
How would you report on a finished basement?
As far as what? Like
if you can't see like the concrete or the CME.
What would you do?
So it's unexpected. Like I can't expect it.
And what is that called in our report?
It's not a latent defect, is it? It's not.
If you are not able to inspect it, then you are what in your inspection? Starts with an L. Limitation.
Oh yeah.
Come on, Luke. Limitation. Limitation. So if you're in a finished basement and you can't visually observe any of the structural components, you will note during the inspection, the basement was finished. The structural components was covered with drywall. I was not able to observe. I disclaim it. Something to that effect is what you would say.
So, when we writing up the defects, how you think how should we frame that paragraph or that short sentences? I know on my homework you said I should be talking more to the installation and things.
I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna teach you the format to write a defect comment. There's a 3-part format, and I'm gonna teach you. We have a class on report writing. So I'm gonna teach you what I want you to focus on when you're doing your actual inspection. I want you to focus on when you're looking at each system, each component. What's the material? How is it installed? Is it properly installed? And then what are the defects? So that's what I mean by that: material, installation, and then defects. But yeah, I'm gonna show you. Trust me, I'm gonna show you how to write a killer report. All Inspector Flow students have the best reports in their states. No cap. People tell me, literally people DM me and message me from all around the country and be like, my inspector said that they went to Inspector Flow and their report was so phenomenal, blah, 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 blah. I'll just be like, cheerio. What else? No más? Are we okay? This is week 3. What we gonna do with homework this week? Is it gonna be on point, or we still like what? Because I'm honestly like ready to see like some real ish. So what we doing?
It's gonna be right this week.
Thank you, Deja. Somebody said something up in this mud. All right. If you were at the study session on Friday and you heeded my warning, you're going to be a very happy camper this week. If you didn't come, too bad, so sad. It's too late. So your homework this week will consist of some nachi and one other item. So it will be released here shortly for you. As always, you know, get on it early. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't email admin and ask if can you use an apartment, because this is home inspector school, folks. You got to have a house. Okay?
I gotta talk to you when we don't.
About what, Rod? What you want to talk to me about? All right, no problem. Any other questions, comments, concerns, expressions of joy? Oh, just as a reminder too, this week, you guys, we have on the third Wednesday of every month, we have a quiet co-working session. We call it a power hour. So it happens this Wednesday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern. We basically just log on to the Zoom. Nobody talks and we just all work. It's sort of a way to be accountable, to, focus and tap in. I'll be there. So if you end up having questions, you're able to ask me questions. So you'll be getting an email about that. Again, it's going to be this Wednesday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern. Also, in October, I will be facilitating an in-person drone training here in Cleveland. So you are welcome to attend that at no cost to you. I work with a nonprofit who basically hired me to do these drone classes, so my students can come for free. If you are from Ohio, they will also pay for your test if you go through this class. So I'll give you more information about that, but you are welcome to come, whether you're from Ohio or not. If you want to come and hang out for 2 days, you can come and do that. So that'll be in October, as well as I will be hosting an NHIE test prep session, which will be open to the public. It will be a live session. It sort of puts you in the mind of like those test prep sessions that we had like for the ACT and stuff like that, where we go over what's on the test, what you need to like kind of just a condensed version. So I'll be doing that. It'll be, again, a paid event for the public. You all will be able to attend for free. So you'll get more information about that, but I just wanted to put it on your consciousness. Okay?
Please, how soon in October are you gonna, not October, how soon are you gonna release information about the drone class, so I can put that on my schedule? Flying down.
Let me work on that this week. I'll do my best to have the dates for you by Friday.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Did you have a question? No? Okay. All right. If all hearts and minds are clear, everybody good?
Can I message you directly about something I asked the admin, and they said there wasn't really quite any availabilities, but I wanted to ask you about something if I could.
Yeah. Or hang around.
At ICC.
Okay, hang around for a second. All right, everybody else, you all have a blessed week. Take care. I will see you on Wednesday and or Friday. Rod and Prescott, hang out. Peace. All right, hold up. Oops, I did that wrong. Oh, look, I did it wrong. Okay, Rod, what's up?
So I just moved out of town to Virginia for a job. And it's like, it's not temporary employment, but I'm going to be in like hotels for the next 6 months, probably.
Oh,
So,
but you're
I'm
still
not
going to be
saying-
inspecting in Michigan?
Yeah, that's why I didn't like say I'm from Virginia or anything.